My name is Wilfred Barlow, and in my 72 years, I have finally realized one simple truth. Family can hurt you more than any stranger. 3 years ago, I buried my Edith, 47 years together, and suddenly I was alone in our home in Fargo. The empty rooms seemed to mock my loneliness. Then I made the mistake of persuading my son to move in with him in Maynooth. Shook him. "Dad, you can't live alone in a house this big," Christopher said on the phone. "We have plenty of room. Lilith will be happy to see Grandpa every day." I sold the house where I had lived most of my life. The things Edith and I had collected over decades went to garage sales or charities. I left only a few photographs, her favorite rocking chair, and a box of letters she had kept all the years of our marriage. Christopher welcomed me with open arms. His wife Veronique smiled, but her eyes remained cold. But little Lilith, who was only 3 at the time, jumped for joy and dragged me to show me her room, her dolls and drawings. Christopher is 39 and has always been a gentle man, just like his mother. He works as an accountant for a local farm equipment firm, though I always thought he could have accomplished more. Things went relatively smoothly for the first few weeks. I was assigned a room on the first floor, small but cozy. I tried to stay out of the way of the young family, making breakfast while they were still asleep, and spending a lot of time with Lilith when she returned from kindergarten. The girl looks like Edith, the same clear blue eyes and stubborn chin. When I look at my granddaughter, it's like seeing my wife as a child. The trouble started about a month later. One morning, soon the remarks became more frequent. "I turn the TV on too loud. I take too long in the bathroom. My books take up too much space in the living room." Every day, Veronique found a new reason to be displeased. Christopher always stood between us, trying to smooth things over but never taking sides. Typical peacemaker, afraid of upsetting both his wife and his father. Sometimes I would notice the weariness in his eyes and realize that there was a continuing conversation waiting for him at home when I wouldn't hear. "Dad, Veronique is just worried about Lilith," he would explain after another remark from his wife. "She's a good mother." "I know, son," I replied, though I believed it less and less every day. 6 months into my stay with them, I learned that the family was having money problems. By chance, I overheard a loud conversation in the kitchen late at night. "We missed the mortgage payment again, Chris," Veronique hissed. "The bank has sent a warning. What are you going to do?" "I'm going to ask for a promotion at work," Christopher replied uncertainly. "You've been saying that for 2 years." I could hear the contempt in her voice. "You'd better ask your father to help you. After all, he lives here for free." I felt like I'd been punched in the chest. I never thought I was living off them. I paid for my groceries, helped with utility bills, bought things for Lilith, but apparently it wasn't enough. The next morning, I struck up a conversation with my son myself. "Christopher, I hear you're having trouble with your mortgage." He blushed and looked away. "Dad, don't worry, we'll be fine." "I can help," I offered. "I have retirement savings. I don't need them as much as you need a roof over your head." My son hesitated, but that same night he accepted my offer. So I started paying most of their mortgage and then other bills. Officially, the house belonged to Christopher and Veronique. They had bought it the year before I arrived, but now I was effectively supporting their family. This changed the dynamic of our relationship, but not in the way I expected. Instead of being grateful, Veronique started treating me even worse. Now she didn't just make remarks, but openly showed annoyance at my presence. One day, as I was reading a book in the living room, she came in and turned off the light. "We're saving electricity, Wilford. There's a lamp in your room." I left in silence. What was the use of arguing with a woman who saw me only as a nuisance? But what bothered me most was the effect it was having on Lilith. The girl noticed the tension between the adults. One day she asked, "Grandpa, why is Mommy angry with you?" "Adults sometimes can't agree, honey," I answered, hugging her. "But that doesn't mean we don't love each other." It was a lie, but what else could I say to a child? My only joy in that house was spending time with my granddaughter. I helped her with her first letters, read her fairy tales, taught her to play chess on the little traveling board I had brought with me. Lilith picked up everything on the fly. At 5, she already knew the basics of the game, and sometimes even beat me when I didn't give in too obviously. "Grandpa, tell me more about Grandma Edith," she often asked, and I would tell her about how we'd met at a dance in '59, how she collected porcelain elephants, how she made the best cherry pie in North Dakota. Sometimes I noticed Veronique standing in the doorway, listening to these stories with an unreadable expression on her face. Lilith, it's time for bed, she usually said, interrupting our conversation. You have daycare tomorrow. I suspected Veronique was jealous of my daughter, though it didn't make sense. I wasn't trying to replace her mother. I just wanted to be a grandfather. By the end of my second year living in their house, the situation had become unbearable. Veronique hardly spoke to me directly, channeling everything through Christopher. My son looked exhausted, constantly torn between us. I thought more and more about getting my own place, but the thought of breaking up with Lilith stopped me. Besides, I had already spent a good portion of my savings on their mortgage. One evening, when Christopher was late for work and Lilith was already asleep, Veronique came to me in the kitchen. Wilford, we need to talk. I put the paper aside. Yes, Veronique. I noticed that you keep your papers in your room, she began. Yes, my personal papers are in there. I think we should know how you've managed your finances. Her voice sounded businesslike. In case something happens to you, you're not getting any younger. I looked her straight in the eye. My lawyer has my will. Christopher will get his, don't worry. It's not just about the will. She lowered her voice. Shawam, Christopher and I think you'd be safer in a specialized facility. For the elderly. That's it. A nursing home. I clenched my fists under the table, but kept my expression calm. I'm perfectly capable of taking care of myself, Veronique, and I don't plan on moving anywhere. But think about it, she insisted. There will be people your age there, medical staff, and we can visit you every week. What about the money I'm putting into your house? I asked her bluntly. Will they move into the nursing home too? She flared up. If you're implying that we're using you for money, that's insulting. Christopher is your son, and we just want the best for you. The conversation was interrupted when we heard the front door open. Christopher had returned. Veronique quickly got up and walked out of the kitchen, leaving me alone with my thoughts. I couldn't sleep for a long time that night. I went over my options in my mind. I could have rented an apartment, but most of my money was already spent on their mortgage. What then? See Lilith on weekends, if Veronique would let me? I felt trapped. The next day I went to the bank and requested copies of all the payments I was making toward my son's family's mortgage. I also learned that the contract Christopher had signed listed me as a co-borrower with the right to buy out my share in case of late payments. This was done to improve the terms of the loan because of my good credit history. My son mentioned it in passing at the time, and I signed the papers without looking into it. I just wanted to help. I didn't plan to use the information at that point. I just wanted to know where I stood. But when I got home and saw Veronique whispering something to Christopher, who then avoided my gaze all evening, I knew I had to be prepared for the worst. Every day the atmosphere in the house became more and more tense. Veronique started accidentally forgetting to hand me the phone when my old friends called. One day I found some of my belongings rearranged, as if someone had rummaged through my room. And then Lilith casually mentioned, Grandpa and Mom said you're going to go live in a special home soon, where there are lots of grandparents. I clenched my teeth but smiled at my granddaughter. Don't worry about that, sweetie. Let's read your favorite book. That night I made a decision. I'm not going to be an uncomplaining victim. I'm not going to let myself be tossed on the side of the road like I'm worthless. I have dignity and rights. I gathered all the documents from the bank, printouts of payments, a contract with my signature as co-borrower. I put them in a folder and waited for the right moment. The right moment would come very soon. In a week, Lilith would be 6 years old. Lilith's birthday was exactly 1 week away. 6 years was an important date. The girl had already started counting the days, and every morning she happily told me how many days were left. I saw in her eyes the same eager anticipation of a miracle that I had once seen in Christopher's eyes. Grandpa, Mom promised a unicorn cake and real candles for me to blow out, Lilith said excitedly, climbing up into my chair. And the girls from my group are coming too, and Alex and Penny. That's wonderful, my joy, I stroked her head. What would you like to get as a present? Lilith thought for a moment, her forehead furrowed, just like Edith's when she was making a serious decision. I want the most beautiful storybook, she finally announced. One with lots and lots of stories and pretty pictures, and I want you to read them all to me. I smiled. Edith loved books too, and could sit for hours with a novel, forgetting everything in the world. To see this trait in Lilith was both joyful and painful, as if a small part of my wife continued to live. Deal. The most beautiful book of fairy tales in the world. I held out my pinky finger, and Lilith clasped it firmly with her own. Our secret way of sealing promises. Later that afternoon, I headed to the mall. The bookstore in Maynooth was small, but with a decent selection of children's literature. I spent almost an hour going through the different editions of fairy tales. Finally, I chose a thick leather-bound volume with gold embossing Great Fairy Tales of the World, with illustrations by famous artists. The book was expensive, but how can you save money on a gift for the only granddaughter? However, the book was not my only gift. In the jewelry department, I saw a small silver heart-shaped locket with a chain strong enough for a child. A small photograph could be placed inside. I had a picture of Edith about Lilith's age, smiling, holding a bunch of wildflowers. The saleswoman helped me reduce and insert the photo into the locket. "For your granddaughter?" she asked, wrapping the locket in a velvet box. "Yes, she's turning 6, I replied proudly. "What a wonderful gift. She'll be wearing a piece of family history. That's exactly what I wanted, for Lilith to always be able to carry a piece of our family with her, even when I wasn't around." When I got home, I hid the gifts in my room, on the top shelf of my closet. I wanted to surprise not only Lilith, but also Veronique and Christopher. Somehow I thought it was important that they see that I was capable of a thoughtful, dignified gift. Silly, senile pride. In the evening, Veronique called a family council to discuss the holiday. We sat at the kitchen table, she with a notebook, Christopher looking at his hands and me. "So," Veronique began, tapping her pen on the table, "we've invited 12 kids, 4 moms who will be staying to help, my sister Patricia and her husband. The party starts at 2 o'clock in the afternoon." "That sounds good," Christopher said. "I ordered a cake from Henderson's Bakery." "Good." Veronique made a note in her notebook. "Now for the program. I'm thinking yard games first, then presents and cake, then cartoons until the parents start picking up the kids." I coughed. "Can I suggest something?" Veronique looked up at me with barely concealed irritation. "Of course, Wilford. What would that be?" "I could organize a treasure hunt game for the children," I suggested. "Hide little presents around the house and garden, draw a map with clues. We used to do that for Christopher when he was a kid, and he loved it." The son smiled, clearly remembering. "It really was fun, Dad." But Veronique shook her head. "I'm sorry, but I've already planned all the games. Besides, the treasure hunt might be too complicated for 6-year-olds, and I don't want them snooping all over the house." "They're 6 years old, not 3, I objected gently. "And I'd limit the area to just the living room and the backyard." "I said no," Veronique cut me off. "We already have a plan for the party. Lilith doesn't need your outdated entertainment." Christopher fidgeted restlessly in his chair. "Maybe we could combine your ideas. We could have traditional games and then—" "Chris, we've already discussed this," Veronique interrupted him in a tone that didn't allow any objections. "I've been organizing for a month. It's already decided." I noticed my son deflated, slumping his shoulders. He could never stand up to his wife's pressure. This boy was born with his hands up. That's what Edith used to say when he gave in to his friend's childish arguments. "All right," I decided not to insist. "What kind of help do you expect from me on the day of the feast?" Veronique exchanged a quick glance with Christopher. "Actually, Wilford," she said with feigned politeness, "we thought you might be tired of being around noisy children all day. Perhaps you could just congratulate Lilith in the morning and then rest in your room?" I felt the blood rush to my face. "You want me to miss my own granddaughter's birthday?" "Dad," Christopher intervened conciliatingly, "Veronique is just worried about you. It's going to be noisy, lots of running around. I'm 72, not 92. I cut him off. "I'm perfectly capable of handling a children's party." Veronique pressed her lips into a thin line. "As you wish, but don't expect us to entertain you too." With that, the family council ended. Christopher hurried into the garage to tinker with the car, his usual way of avoiding tension. Veronique stayed in the kitchen, defiantly ignoring my presence. I returned to my room feeling bitter and resentful. The next morning, Lilith came running to me before preschool. "Grandpa, Mom said you don't want to come to my birthday party." I was shocked. That's not true at all, sunshine. I really want to be at your party. You do? Her lower lip trembled. Because mommy said you'll be bored with little kids and you'd rather sit in your room. I hugged my granddaughter. Listen to me, Lilith. I will never ever miss your birthday, I promise you. She brightened up and hugged me back tightly. I'm so glad. I wanted to show you my birthday outfit and introduce you to Penny. She can't believe I have a real grandfather. After Lilith left for daycare, I sat in my room for a long time trying to deal with my anger. Using a child for manipulation was a new low blow from Veronique. I thought about the file folder hidden among my belongings. Maybe it was time to put them to use. But no, I didn't want to ruin Lilith's celebration. Revenge could wait. The next few days passed in tense anticipation. Veronique avoided me, communicating only through short, dry phrases when necessary. Christopher looked exhausted, torn between work, holiday preparations, and the constant tension at home. 3 days before my birthday, I was sitting on the back porch, trying to enjoy a rare sunny October day, when Veronique came out into the yard with a phone in her hand. She didn't see me behind the high back of the garden chair and settled on a bench by the flower bed. Hi, Sandra, I heard her voice. Yes, the preparations are in full swing. No, I'm not worried. I'm just tired of it all. There was a pause while she listened to the other person. I wasn't about to eavesdrop and was about to stand up to make my presence known when I heard my name. Wilford? Veronique snorted. Still the same. Can you believe he wanted to do some stupid treasure hunt game? It's like we're living in the last century. I froze and decided to listen. Yes, we talked to him after the party, she continued. I've already found a great place. Sunny Birches. They accept seniors with any degree of independence, so he'll be fine. Sunny Birches is the local nursing home. It's not the worst, but it's not the best either. I'd visited an old friend there a year ago and remembered the faceless hallways, the smell of medication, and the empty eyes of the residents. No, Christopher doesn't know all the details yet. Veronique's voice grew quieter. He's too sentimental when it comes to his father. But I'm working on it. She was silent for a moment, listening to her friend's answer. Of course, his pension will remain tied to our accounts, she said with businesslike satisfaction. I've already consulted a lawyer. Since we are providing him with housing and care, we are entitled to compensation. The fact that he'll be in another place is just a formality. His pension is just enough to pay for a basic-level nursing home and support our mortgage. My hands clenched into fists. So they were planning not just to get rid of me, but to keep using my money. I heard my heart pounding and forced myself to breathe more slowly. This was no time for a heart attack. Lilith? Veronique continued in the meantime. She'll be upset at first, of course, but children forget quickly. We'll tell her Grandpa needs special care, and we'll visit him once a month. In 6 months, she'll stop asking. Her cold calculation made me physically sick. She was planning to cut me out of Lilith's life, like I was nothing. Yes, we've already started to prepare the ground, Veronique added, her voice lowering to a whisper. I told Lilith that Grandpa doesn't want to attend the party because he doesn't like noisy children. She was upset, but it would help her realize that she didn't need Grandpa in her life that much. I barely restrained myself from standing up and saying everything I thought about this woman. But years of experience had taught me that a cool head was the best counselor in difficult situations. Instead, I continued to listen, gathering information for the battle ahead. Of course, he'll be better off there, Veronique was now feigning concern. He'll get the care he needs, socialization with his peers, and we'll finally be able to live a normal life without the constant stress. Her phone beeped. Oh, Sandra, I gotta run. It's from the bakery about the cake. Yeah, I'll see you at the party. Bye. I heard her get up and walk briskly toward the house. It wasn't until the door slammed shut behind her that I let myself exhale and relaxed my clenched fists. There were deep nail marks on my palms, so here was their plan. Wait until after the holiday had passed, so as not to overshadow Lilith's birthday. How thoughtful. And then put me in a nursing home, continuing to use my pension for their own needs. And all this behind my back, without even having the courage to discuss it with me directly. I sat on the porch for a long time, looking out at the fading garden. The maples were dropping their last leaves, preparing for winter. When I was young, I had loved autumn for its bright colors and bounty. Now I saw it only as a harbinger of cold and death. At that moment, I made a final decision. I will not be a victim without complaint. I will not allow myself to be treated like a feeble old man, unable to make decisions about my own life, and I certainly wouldn't allow my money to be used by people who wanted to cut me out of my granddaughter's life. But I had to tread carefully. First, Lilith's party. I wouldn't ruin it with my own problems. Then I had to take drastic measures. I took out a folder with documents and once again scrutinized everything I had. The contract with my signature as co-borrower, records of all the payments for the last 2.5 years, account statements showing how my pension was regularly transferred to pay their mortgage. That evening, Christopher knocked on my room. "Dad, can I come in?" I put the papers away and let my son in. He looked worried. "Is something wrong?" I asked. Christopher sat down on the edge of the bed. "I wanted to talk about the holiday. Veronique said you might be tired of all the fuss, but I want you to know that we both want you there. You're an important part of our family." A lie. Another lie, perhaps not even realized. Christopher had always been a master of self-deception. "Of course I'll be at the party," I replied calmly. "I promised Lilith." "Great," he looked relieved. "Also, Veronique is a bit tense because of the preparations. If she seems abrupt, don't take it personally, okay?" "Don't worry, son," I patted his shoulder. "I understand. I understand a lot more than you think," I wanted to add. After he left, I pulled out the gifts for Lilith. The book and the medallion were waiting for their time. I hoped they would be not just birthday presents, but a reminder of me when I wasn't around. Not because I would end up in Sunny Birches, but because I had decided to take my life into my own hands. Lilith's birthday was approaching, and with it, the moment of truth. Lilith's birthday came on a clear Saturday morning. I woke up earlier than usual, immediately sensing the day's peculiarity. The excitement of the day was in the house. From the kitchen came the sound of dishes and the muffled voices of Veronique and her sister Patricia, who had come to help with the preparations. I pulled an ironed shirt out of the closet, the navy blue one that Lilith had once called Grandpa's nicest shirt. Carefully, he wrapped the gifts in festive paper with unicorns and rainbows. The book looked impressive even in its wrapping, and the little box with the locket seemed almost unnoticeable next to it. As I left the room, I ran into Christopher, who looked excited and a little confused. "Good morning, Dad," he smiled nervously. "Veronique sent me to get extra chairs for the Rogerses. I'll be back in an hour." "Is Lilith awake yet?" I asked. "No. Veronique said she'd let her sleep a little longer so she'd be awake for the party." Christopher was obviously in a hurry. He was already pulling on his jacket. "I'm counting on you, Dad," he added in a low voice. "Will you help me smooth things over?" Veronique's worked up about the holiday. I nodded and he slipped out the door with relief. My son has been running from conflict his whole life. In the kitchen, Veronique and Patricia were arranging appetizers on trays. At my appearance, Veronique gave me a brief glance and went back to slicing fruit. "Good morning," I said hello. "Good morning," Veronique replied dryly. Patricia, a red-headed copy of her sister, but with softer features, smiled at me. "Hello, Wilford. It's good to see you." "Can I help you?" I offered as I approached the table. "Thank you. We're doing fine," Veronique said. "You'd better stay out of the way." I made myself a cup of coffee and went out to the backyard. The colorful tables and chairs that Christopher had brought in last night were already there. Garlands and balloons hung from the trees. In the corner of the yard was a bouncy castle, a gift from Christopher that had cost him a pretty penny. As I walked back into the house, I heard Lilith's voice. "Mommy, it's my birthday." I smiled. Edith, too, always announced her birthday as soon as she woke up, as if everyone could forget it. As I went upstairs, I saw Lilith in her dinosaur pajamas bouncing on the bed. Veronique was trying to sit her up to brush her tangled post-sleep hair. "Grandpa," Lilith exclaimed when she saw me, "today is my 6th birthday." "Happy birthday, my princess." I handed her a bag of presents. "These are for you." "Wilford," Veronique intervened, "we agreed that the gifts would be given during the party." "These are special gifts," I objected, "from Grandpa personally." Lilith was already reaching for the package. "May I, Mom? Please." Veronique nodded reluctantly. "Just quickly. We still have to get you ready for the guests." Lilith unpacked the book with a squeal of delight. "Wow, it's so beautiful. And thick. There must be 100 fairy tales in it." 237, I said, "from all over the world. I want you to read them all to me." She clutched the book to her chest. I'll read them all, I promised. What else is there? Lilith noticed the second box. Open it and you'll find out. She carefully unfolded the paper and opened the velvet box. A necklace, like a princess's. It's called a locket. I helped her open the heart. See? Inside is a picture of your grandmother Edith when she was about your age. Lilith looked at the tiny photo in awe. She was so beautiful, and she looked like me. Very much like me, I agreed, helping her put on the locket. Now a piece of our family history will always be with you. Veronique watched the scene with poorly concealed irritation. Okay, Lilith, now put the book on the table and let's go get ready. The guests will be here in 3 hours. I want to wear the locket to the party, said Lilith. It doesn't go with your dress, Veronique objected. We already have a set of jewelry that we picked out at the store. But I want this one, she repeated stubbornly, clutching the locket in her hand. Lilith, don't be naughty, her voice became harsh. We're not going to ruin the outfit because of this trinket. It's not a trinket, Lilith exclaimed with tears in her voice. It's grandmother. I decided to intervene. Veronique, why don't we let her wear what she wants? After all, it's her holiday. Veronique turned to me, her eyes narrowed. Don't tell me how to raise my daughter. You've already screwed up enough plans with your ill-timed gifts. I only gave her what I promised, I said calmly. And you turned her against me, she hissed. As usual. Mom, Grandpa, don't fight, Lilith pleaded, shifting her gaze from one to the other. Veronique took a deep breath, obviously trying to pull herself together. Okay, Lilith, you can put the locket on. Now go to the bathroom. We need to wash our heads. As the door closed behind Lilith, Veronique turned to me. I know what you're doing, Wilford. Trying to get her on your side. I don't have sides, Veronique, I shrugged. I just want to be a good grandfather. Good grandfathers don't undermine the authority of parents, she cut me off, and they don't manipulate children through expensive gifts. I decided not to answer so as not to inflame the conflict further. The next few hours passed in a flurry of preparations. Christopher arrived with chairs. Then a huge cake with a unicorn figurine was delivered. I tried to stay out of the way, helping only when asked, mostly Christopher, who was visibly nervous. By 2 o'clock, the guests began to arrive. Excited children with brightly colored presents in their hands and their parents. Lilith wearing a lush pink dress and a medallion around her neck. I noticed Veronique cringe when she saw it, greeted her friends beaming with happiness. The festivities went on as usual. The children played in the yard under the supervision of Patricia and a few moms. Veronique supervised the proceedings. Christopher took care of the adult beverages. I sat on the sidelines, watching the fun and occasionally taking pictures of Lilith with my old camera, one of the few items I had kept from my former life. After the cake, it was time for presents. There were many of them. Toys, art kits, beautiful clothes. Lilith opened each one with delight, not forgetting to thank the giver. By 5 o'clock in the evening, the festivities began to quiet down. Parents were picking up their tired but happy children. Lilith and her friend Penny, who was to be picked up last, were playing with their new dolls in the living room. I was helping Christopher pick up trash in the yard when I heard his phone ring. He answered it and after a short conversation came to me with a concerned look. Dad, I need to go to the office right away. There's a problem with the quarterly report and tomorrow's the deadline. On Saturday? I was surprised. Oh, it's an important client. He waved his hands guiltily. I have to be there. Veronique knows. I'll try to get back as soon as possible. Christopher hurriedly said goodbye to Lilith and left. When I got back to the house, Penny had already been picked up and Lilith was sitting on the living room floor, sorting through presents. Veronique was tidying up the kitchen. Grandpa, look at all the presents I've gotten, Lilith exclaimed, pointing to the pile of boxes and packages. Those are wonderful gifts, I agreed, sitting down next to her. But most importantly, did you have a good day? The best birthday ever, she hugged me. And you know what? Alex said that my locket is cooler than all princess crowns. I laughed. Smart boy, that Alex. At that moment, Veronique entered the room. Her face expressed extreme fatigue and irritation. Lilith, gather your things and take them to your room. Then I'll take a bath and we'll go to bed. It's been a long day. But it's early, Lilith objected. And I wanted grandfather to read to me from the new book. No, Veronique cut her off. You're overexcited and tired. The book isn't going anywhere. Please, Mommy, just one story. Veronique looked at me with undisguised hostility. You see what you've done? Now she won't listen. It's not my fault, I replied calmly. The child just wants to read a book on her birthday. Don't tell me how to raise my daughter. Veronique raised her voice. I've tolerated your presence all day for Lilith's sake, but my patience is wearing thin. Mom, please. Lilith looked frightened. Go to your room, Veronique shouted. Now! Lilith grabbed the book and ran out of the room, barely holding back her tears. I got to my feet. Don't you think you're being too hard on her birthday? Don't you think you're overstepping your bounds? Veronique parried. This is my house and my daughter. You're on bird's rights here. Bird rights? I chuckled. Interesting wording for a man who lives on my money. What did you say? You heard me just fine. Who's been paying your mortgage for the last 2.5 years? Who's been paying most of the bills? You live with us for free, she snapped, and you're always meddling in our lives. I heard your conversation with Sandra, I said, looking her straight in the eye, about the sun birches, about how you plan to continue using my pension even after you get rid of me. Veronique turned pale. You were eavesdropping? Accidentally overheard, I corrected. But that doesn't change the point. You were planning to throw me out of Lilith's life, like I was a waste. You don't understand, she tried to pull herself together. Christopher and I had your best interests in mind. A specialized facility will give you the right care. Stop these lies, I held up my hand. You're only interested in my money. You manipulate Christopher, you turn Lilith against me, and you have the nerve to talk about my well-being? Huh. You have no right to talk to me like that. Veronique was almost screaming. This is my home. Technically, it's my house too, I pointed out. I'm a co-borrower on the mortgage, in case you've forgotten, with the right to buy your share if you fall behind on your payments. What? Christopher didn't tell you. When you bought the house, you had a bad credit history. The bank only agreed to give you a mortgage with my signature as co-borrower, with special conditions. You're bluffing, she said uncertainly. Check the paperwork. I won't let you destroy my family, Veronique finally said. Get your things and get out of my house tonight. I'd be happy to, I nodded. Just don't forget that my mortgage payments will go with me. Get out, she pointed to the door. Now! I calmly went to my room. There wasn't much to pack. I had packed the most important things yesterday. Clothes, photos, documents. Everything fit into one suitcase and a backpack. I took out from the closet a folder with documents prepared in advance. My surprise for Veronique, a full set of papers proving my right to a share in the house and a detailed record of all payments for the last years. In the hallway, I ran into Lilith. She was standing in her pajamas clutching a book of fairy tales. Grandpa, where are you going? Why do you have a suitcase? I squatted down in front of her. I have to go away for a while, Sunshine. But why? She sounded desperate. You promised to read me fairy tales. And I'll keep my promise, I hugged her. Just not tonight. Is this about Mom? I heard you two fighting. Adults sometimes can't agree, I repeated my earlier words. Nasrananam. But that doesn't mean we don't love each other. I don't want you to leave. I know, sweetheart. I kissed her forehead. But sometimes we have to do things we don't want to do. Take care of your locket, okay? And remember that Grandpa always loves you. Lilith! Veronica's voice came from the back of the house. Go to your room at once. The girl hugged me even tighter and then reluctantly pulled back. Promise me you'll come back. I promise I'll see you again, I said carefully. Lilith ran to her room. I went downstairs with my suitcase and backpack. Veronique stood at the front door with her arms crossed over her chest. Did you tell Lilith I was kicking you out? She hissed. No, I shook my head. I don't use a child as a weapon. I put the file on the coffee table. These are for you. Study it carefully, especially the last page. Summer, what is it? She looked at the folder warily. My parting gift, I took the suitcase. A surprise, you might say. I walked out the door without looking back. The October evening was chilly, but I didn't feel cold. The fire of long, contained anger and newfound determination burned inside me. I ordered a cab and gave the address of a small hotel in downtown Maynooth. During the ride, my phone vibrated several times with incoming messages, but I didn't look at the screen. It wasn't until I checked into the hotel and went up to the modest but clean room that I pulled out my phone. 5 missed from Veronique, 2 messages. Call me back immediately, it's important. Wilford, we need to talk, it's serious. Veronique seemed to have studied the contents of the folder and realized the seriousness of the situation. The phone rang again. This time I decided to answer it. Wilford? Veronique's voice sounded broken. You can't do this to us. I can't? I asked calmly. Why not? These documents. You're really a co-borrower with the right of redemption? Yes. And I've stopped all mortgage payments as of today. But that would bankrupt us. She sounded panicked. We're going to lose the house. Just as you were going to get rid of me, I'm going to get rid of you, I replied. Symmetrical, don't you think? Please, her voice became pleading. Let's talk. We can work this out. Come home and we can discuss the situation calmly. Home? I grinned bitterly. You just called it your home and kicked me out. I overreacted, she said hastily. I was upset and tired after the party. Of course it's your home too. We're a family, Wilford. A family doesn't throw their old people into nursing homes and continue to use their money. You didn't overhear the whole conversation, Veronique finally said. I was just discussing options with a friend. We never seriously planned. Enough lies, I interrupted her. I know what you planned. And I know you manipulated Christopher and turned Lilith against me. Please, she sounded desperate. Come back. For Lilith's sake, she will be inconsolable. The mention of my granddaughter stung, but I remained firm. The decision has been made, Veronique. The check has been signed. The bank has been notified. But what are we going to tell Christopher? She was almost crying now. He will be destroyed. The truth, and I answered, for the first time in a long time. The first night in the hotel was restless. I tossed and turned in the unfamiliar bed, listening to the muffled sounds of the city outside my window, the occasional car, the siren of an ambulance, someone's distant laughter. After the quiet of the suburbs, these sounds seemed intrusive and alien, but they weren't what kept me awake. I thought of Lilith, her confused face when she saw me with the suitcase, how tightly she hugged me goodbye. I didn't regret my decision. It was the only right thing to do. But the pain of parting with my granddaughter gnawed at me from the inside. My phone kept vibrating with incoming messages until late at night. Veronique never gave up trying to contact me. Her messages evolved from angry demands to pitiful pleas. At some point, I simply turned my phone off. The morning brought clarity of thought. I woke up at first light, a habit developed over many decades. I showered, shaved, dressed. The small mirror over the sink reflected my face wrinkled, tired, but with a new expression of determination in my eyes. You can do it, old man, I said to my reflection. It's not the first time you've started from scratch. I went down to the small cafe at the hotel. I ordered coffee and oatmeal, a simple but hearty breakfast. While I waited for my order, I turned on my phone. 37 missed calls and 23 messages. Most were from Veronique, but there were a few from Christopher too. I opened the last one from my son. Dad, please answer. I don't understand what's going on. Veronique is hysterical. What kind of papers did you leave behind? Why did you leave? Lilith won't stop crying. We need to talk. I took a deep breath. Christopher deserved an explanation, but not over the phone. I quickly typed a reply. I'm fine. Staying at the North Star Hotel. Come alone at noon today if you want to talk. Alone, Christopher. It's important. After sending the message, I opened the bank app on my phone. Yesterday, in the hustle and bustle of leaving, I'd forgotten to formally notify the bank to stop making mortgage payments. I needed to do it now, lest my words to Veronique turn out to be an empty threat. I went into the automatic payment section and canceled all transfers related to my son's house. Mortgage, utilities, insurance. The system asked for confirmation. I clicked yes, feeling oddly relieved. Over the past 2.5 years, these payments had eaten up a significant portion of my savings. Now that money would stay with me. To be sure, I called the bank and spoke to a manager, explaining the situation. Christopher confirmed he'd be in at noon. There were a few more messages from Veronique, which I ignored. I pulled a file folder out of my suitcase, a copy of the one I'd left yesterday. I reread the terms of the mortgage agreement, especially the clauses about co-borrowers and their rights. It was exactly as I remembered it. As a co-borrower with a right of redemption, I could claim a share of the house if the primary borrower defaulted. And given that I'd made most of the payments over the past few years, my potential share was significant. At 11 o'clock and 30 minutes, I went down to the small lobby of the hotel to meet Christopher. I took a seat in a chair overlooking the front door and waited. He showed up at 12 sharp. He was always punctual, unlike his wife. He looked gaunt and sleep-deprived. Looking around, he spotted me and came over. "Daddy," he said, his voice a mixture of relief and confusion. "What's going on? Why did you leave?" "Sit down," I pointed to the chair across from me. "It's going to be a long conversation." He lowered himself into the chair, keeping his eyes on me. "Veronique said you two had a fight, that you threatened to take the house away from us. Is that true?" "Not exactly," I shook my head. "I didn't threaten to take the house. I just stopped paying for it." "But why?" He looked genuinely surprised. I thought we were doing well." "We were?" I grinned bitterly. "Christopher, your wife had planned to put me in a nursing home right after Lilith's birthday. She intended to continue using my pension to pay your mortgage. Is that good to you?" The son turned pale. "It's impossible. There must be some misunderstanding." "There is no misunderstanding." I took out my phone and turned on the recording of Veronique's conversation with her friend, which I secretly made in the yard. "Listen to it yourself." I pressed play and watched my son's face change as he heard his wife's words. Shock, disbelief, pain, these emotions alternated until the tape ended. "Yeah, I didn't know," he finally squeezed out. "I swear, Dad, I had no idea what she was planning." "I believe you," I nodded. "But that doesn't change the point. You let your wife manipulate you and me. You turned a blind eye to the way she treated me in your house. I just wanted to keep the peace." He lowered his head. "You know how she is when she's angry." "Is that why you sacrificed me? Your father?" I stepped forward. "Christopher, I sold my house to move in with you. I gave most of my pension to support your family. And in return, they were going to send me to Sun Birch and keep milking me like a cash cow." "I would never have agreed to that." He sounded desperate. "But I wouldn't have actively resisted it either." I shrugged. "You'd resist, argue, and then give in, like you always do." He couldn't find anything to object. We both knew I was right. "Those documents you left behind," he finally said. "Is it true that you can claim a share in our house?" "Yes," I nodded. "I'm a co-borrower with a right of redemption. It was a condition of the bank when you took out the mortgage. You didn't have the best credit history, and Veronique had none at all. They only agreed to give the loan with my signature." "I remember that," he nodded. "But I didn't realize it gave you those rights." "You have to read what you sign, son." I smiled slightly. "That's what I've been teaching you since you were a kid." There was silence. Christopher was obviously digesting the information, trying to find a way out of the situation. "What are you going to do next?" he finally asked. "Live my life," I shrugged. "Get an apartment, maybe a part-time job. I'm only 72. I'm not a wreck yet." "What about us?" There was panic in his voice. "Room. Dad, we can't pay the mortgage without your help. We don't have that kind of money." "We're going to have to learn to live within our means," I said firmly, "or sell the house and buy something cheaper. It's your choice." "And Lilith?" He looked up at me. "She asks about you every 5 minutes. Cries, doesn't want to go to daycare." It hurt, but I remained firm. "I love Lilith more than anything in the world, and I'd love to see her, but not in your house or under Veronique's supervision." "She won't allow it," Christopher said quietly. "Not after all this." "Then you'll have to decide, son. Who's the head of your family, you or Veronique?" I stood up, signaling that the conversation was over. "Think about it, and about the example you're setting for your daughter." Christopher stood up too. He looked lost. "What do I tell Veronique?" "The truth," I answered. "That your father will no longer be the scapegoat in your family, and that it was time for you to learn to live without my money." He nodded, clearly not knowing what else to say. "I'll call you in a few days," I added more gently. when we've both cooled down a little, and tell Lilith that Grandpa loves her and we'll see her soon. After I walked Christopher to the exit, I returned to the hotel lobby. There was an emptiness inside, not from regret for what I'd said, but from the realization of how deep the gulf between me and my son's family was. I didn't know if it could be bridged, and I wasn't sure I wanted to. An older woman appeared in the hallway who looked vaguely familiar. She stopped, staring at me, and then her face lit up with a smile. Wilford Barlow? Was that you? I looked at her face and suddenly recognized her. Helen? Helen Price? That's the one. The woman came closer. I don't believe it. How many years has it been? 30? 40? Helen Price was a colleague of mine at the insurance company where I worked until I retired 15 years ago. She was a department secretary before rising to the position of administrative director. A smart, energetic woman with a sharp tongue and a kind heart. You haven't changed at all, I lied, smiling. Flatterer, she laughed. And you're still the same gallant old fox. What are you doing in Maynooth? I thought you lived in Fargo. Long story, I waved my hand. What about you? I moved here after I retired, Helen explained. I have a daughter and her family here. Now I just came for a cup of tea. They have a great bergamot tea in the cafeteria. Would you like to join me? I said yes, and we walked over to the hotel's small cafeteria. We ordered tea and cakes. Helen looked good for her age. She must have been in her 70s. Her gray hair was neatly styled, her makeup minimal, but her eyes, bright, lively, gave away her indomitable character. So what brings you to the middle of nowhere? She asked when our order arrived. I hadn't planned to be honest, but there was something about her direct gaze that made me want to be honest. So I told her about moving in with my son, my strained relationship with my daughter-in-law, my overheard conversation, and yesterday's departure. I kept silent only about the financial side of the matter. It seemed too personal, even for an old acquaintance. Helen listened attentively without interrupting. When I finished, she shook her head. It's a familiar story. My friend Martha went through much the same thing. Only her son ended up divorcing his wife and moving in with his mother. I don't think Christopher's capable of that, I sighed. He's never been able to stand up to strong personalities. Veronique has complete control over him. Did you ever think that you might have encouraged that trait in him? Helen asked unexpectedly. Forgive me for being blunt, but you've always been rather dominant. I looked at her in surprise. What do you mean? Remember how you always insisted on having your way in the office? She smiled. Wilford is always right, was our saying. Christopher probably just learned to give in to avoid confrontation with you, and then transferred that model to his relationship with his wife. I wondered. There was some truth to what she said. I was indeed a demanding father, and perhaps too often insisted on my own way. Edith had always said I put too much pressure on the boy. Perhaps you're right, I admitted. Sure you wouldn't one, but that doesn't excuse Veronique's behavior. Of course not, Helen agreed. I'm just suggesting that we look at the situation from a different angle. Your son is sandwiched between two strong personalities, you and his wife. He doesn't know how to stand up to either of you. The thought never occurred to me. I always thought of myself as the victim in this situation, but perhaps I too have contributed to the problem. So what do you suggest? I asked. Nothing, she shrugged. It's just that understanding sometimes helps you make a better decision. You did the right thing to leave, but maybe we should give Christopher a chance to be on his own, without pressure from you. I nodded slowly. You know, you've always been wiser than you seemed at first glance. And you've always been a flatterer. She laughed, but I appreciate the compliment. Now tell me, where do you plan to stay? In this hotel? No, it's temporary. I need to find an apartment. I can help, Helen offered. There's a small apartment on the first floor of my building. Nice neighborhood, close to the park, and the rent's reasonable. Sounds like fun, I smiled. But I don't want to take advantage of your kindness. What kindness? She snorted. Purely practical advice. Besides, it would be nice to have a familiar face in the neighborhood. At our age, new acquaintances don't come easily. We talked for another hour, reminiscing about old colleagues, sharing stories of children and grandchildren. Helen had been a widow for 10 years, living alone, but she led an active lifestyle. She participated in a book club, sang in the choir at the local church, and helped organize town events. I've never understood people who, after retirement, just sit at home and wait to die, she said. Life goes on as long as we breathe, and we have to take what we can from it. Her enthusiasm was contagious. By the end of the conversation, I had agreed to see the apartment she was talking about and even consider joining the book club. No, that's fine. Helen stood up, getting ready to leave. I'll pick you up at 10 tomorrow morning, and we'll go look at the apartment. When she left, I sat in the cafe for a long time, thinking about our conversation. It's strange how a chance encounter can change perspective. Even in the morning, I had felt like a lost old man, thrown out of my family. Now, however, a new feeling was brewing in me. Anticipation, the possibility of a fresh start without manipulation and toxic relationships. Back in the room, I found a few more messages from Veronique and one from Christopher. My son wrote that he had spoken to his wife and she was willing to apologize if I returned. I didn't respond. It was too late for an apology. I would no longer be a victim of circumstance or other people's manipulations. I pulled an old notebook and pen out of my suitcase. I started making a to-do list for the next few days. To look at an apartment, to find a lawyer for mortgage counseling, to check out part-time job opportunities, to update my closet. For the first time in a long time, I felt like the master of my life. On the last page of the notebook, I wrote in big letters, "No more ever." It was a promise to myself to never again let others decide for me how to live my life. Never again to sacrifice my dignity for the illusion of family peace. It's been a week since I left Christopher and Veronique's house. I had managed to change a lot of things in my life in that short time. The apartment Helen had shown me was perfect. Small but cozy, with windows overlooking a quiet park. I paid the deposit immediately and moved in the next day. I didn't want to spend extra money on a hotel. There wasn't much furniture in the apartment. A bed, a table, a couple of chairs, and an old chest of drawers. The owner, an elderly woman who had moved to Minneapolis to live with her daughter, had left it all to the new tenants. I only had to buy a chair, a desk lamp, and a small TV. I wasn't looking for luxury. After all the turmoil, simplicity seemed like a blessing. Helen helped me settle into my new neighborhood. She showed me the nearest store, the pharmacy, and a nice cafe on the corner that served a great blueberry pie. I signed up at the local library and joined her book club. They met once a week to discuss classic literature, mostly 19th century novels. It reminded me of my college literature classes, which I had attended with particular pleasure. The phone continued to burst with calls and messages. Christopher and Veronique never gave up trying to contact me. I answered only to my son, and then only briefly, just to let him know that I was alive and well. It was like a defense mechanism inside me. I didn't want to get involved in new conflicts until I felt strong enough. On the 10th day of my new life, there was a persistent knock on the door. It was about 7 in the evening. I had just returned from a walk and was about to cook dinner. Opening the door, I saw Christopher and Veronique. They looked exhausted. Christopher, pale with shadows under his eyes, wearing a crumpled shirt. Veronique, no makeup, her hair disheveled, looked nothing like the well-groomed and self-assured woman she had always been. Her eyes were a mixture of despair and ill-concealed anger. "Dad," Christopher stepped forward. "We need to talk, please." I stepped back silently, letting them into the apartment. I didn't offer tea or coffee. This visit wasn't a friendly one, and we all understood that. "How did you find me?" I asked when they were seated at the table. "I called the hotel," Christopher answered. "They told me you checked out. But the receptionist remembered you talking to some woman named Helen about an apartment. I found her in the phone book, and here we are. A detective investigation? So this is a really serious situation. To what do I owe the visit?" I sat down across from them, keeping a calm expression on my face. Christopher looked helplessly at Veronique. Even now, he couldn't take the initiative. "Wilford?" Veronique tried to make her voice soft, but it was unconvincing. "We came to apologize. What happened? It was a terrible misunderstanding." "Misunderstanding?" No. I raised an eyebrow. "That's an interesting interpretation. I never seriously considered sending you to a nursing home." She stepped forward. "It was just a conversation with a friend, thinking out loud. You've got it all wrong." "I have a recording of the conversation," I said calmly. Would you like to hear it again? Especially the part about children quickly forget, and in 6 months she'll stop asking about Grandpa. Veronique turned even paler. Dad, Christopher intervened. We both admit we were wrong. Veronique overreacted. She said something she shouldn't have said. But we're a family. We have to stick together. A family doesn't throw their old people away like used clothes, I replied firmly. And they don't use them like an ATM machine. There was an awkward silence. Christopher's head was down, and Veronique was fidgeting nervously with the strap of her wristwatch. We're in trouble, Dad, Christopher finally said. Serious problems. Financial, I assume. He nodded. The bank has already sent a late payment notice. They're going to start foreclosure proceedings in 2 weeks. We tried to get a loan to cover the payment, Veronique added, but we were turned down because of our bad credit history. Ironic, isn't it? I couldn't contain my sarcasm. That's why you needed my signature on the mortgage. Dad, please, Christopher sounded desperate. We could lose the house. What will happen to Lilith? Mentioning my granddaughter was a deliberate move. They knew it was my weakness. How is she? I asked, softening involuntarily. She misses you, Christopher said quietly. She asks every day when you'll be back. I'd love to see her, I said. But not on your terms. What are your terms, Wilford? Veronique looked me straight in the eye. We're prepared to compromise. Are you? I grinned. And a week ago, you were ready to throw me out of your life. What's changed? Only one thing has changed, the money. You're not here for reconciliation. You're here for my wallet. Veronique opened her mouth to object, but Christopher touched her arm warningly. You're right, Dad, he admitted. Sure. Finances are part of the problem, but not the whole problem. We do want to mend the relationship, for Lilith's sake, for all of us. I looked at my son carefully. Perhaps he was sincere, but Veronique, her eyes betrayed her true intentions. She was only here for the money. You know, Christopher, I stepped forward. I've been thinking about our situation for a long time, and I've come to an interesting conclusion. The problem wasn't just how Veronique felt about me. It's how she treats you. What? He seemed confused. She's manipulating you the same way she tried to manipulate me, I continued. Controlling your every move, making decisions for you, isolating you from people who could open your eyes. That's ridiculous, Veronique jumped up. I take care of my husband and family. You do? I turned to her. Then why didn't you discuss with him the plans to send me to a nursing home? Why did you keep it a secret? Because we knew he might not agree. It's easier to confront him, isn't it? Christopher looked from me to his wife in confusion. Veronique, is it true? Of course not. She laughed nervously. Your father is exaggerating. It was just a conversation with a friend, in which you said that I was too sentimental, and that's why you were working on it, I said quietly. What does that mean, Veronique? How are you working on my son? Veronique gritted her teeth. You're taking phrases out of context. It's not fair. Dad, please, Christopher held up a hand, stopping the quarrel that was starting. We didn't come here for this. We came to ask you to come back. The house isn't the same without you. I'm not going back, I said firmly. Never. That chapter of my life is closed. But what about the mortgage? Veronique's voice broke into panic. We can't pay it ourselves. That's your problem, I shrugged. It's your problem. But you're a co-borrower, she reminded me, and if we can't pay it, it will affect your credit history. At my age, credit history doesn't matter that much anymore, I smiled. Sure, I'm not planning any big purchases. Veronique looked like she was ready to explode. Christopher put his hand on her shoulder, reassuring her. Dad, maybe we can find some kind of compromise. You don't want to go back. We understand. But maybe you could help us with the mortgage a little more. Until we find a solution. What solution, Christopher? I looked my son straight in the eye. The miraculous inheritance? Winning the lottery? Or do you plan to sit on my back? We could sell the house, he suggested. Buy something smaller. Cheaper. No, Veronique exclaimed. We're not selling our house. It's out of the question. Why not, dear? Christopher's voice was defiant for the first time. If we can't maintain it, what are our options? She stared at him. clearly unaccustomed to resistance. We'll figure something out. We'll find the money. But I'm not moving from our house to some cheap shack. Pride is expensive, I said. It's easy for you to say, Veronique snapped at me. You don't have a child to take care of. I have a granddaughter to take care of, I objected calmly. And I think it's better for her to live in a house her parents can afford than to grow up in an atmosphere of constant financial stress and family fighting. Christopher nodded. Dad's right, Veronique. We have to be realistic. Without his help, we won't be able to pull off the mortgage. Then let him help us, she exclaimed. He's your father. He should be helping his family. I've been helping for years, I said in a steady voice. I gave most of my pension to your house, and in gratitude, you plan to get rid of me at the first opportunity. It was a misunderstanding. Veronique was almost crying with helplessness. How many times do I have to say it? I shook my head. Veronique, you can deceive yourself, but not me. Your intentions were absolutely clear, and now you are here only because you need my money. Not my company, not my advice, not my love for my granddaughter. Just money. She sat with her eyes down, unable to find anything to say. Sakonakom. Papa, Christopher said quietly, I know it was our fault. I should have protected you, but I didn't. I was weak, and I apologize. I sincerely do. I looked at my son. There was remorse in his eyes, but was there understanding? Did he realize that the problem was deeper than just a conflict between his father and his wife? Christopher, I appreciate your apology, I said, but words mean little without action. You let your wife manipulate you and me for years. You turned a blind eye to the way she treated me in your home. You let her make decisions that should have been made by you as the man and head of the family. I know, he lowered his head. Now think about this. I leaned toward him. So, if she treats your father like this, the man who supported your family financially, how will she treat you when you're old and sick, when you're no longer useful? Veronique jumped up from her chair. This is out of line. You're trying to turn my husband against me. I'm just asking questions he should have asked himself a long time ago. I remained calm. You don't love me, Veronique. That's your right. But do you respect your husband? Do you see him as an equal partner or just a means to your ends? I love my husband, her voice shook with rage. But do you respect him? I repeated. Do you let him make decisions? Or do you always know best? Christopher sat staring at the floor, his shoulders slumped. There was a heavy silence in the room. Christopher, I said softly at last, Washin, I don't want to destroy your family. I just want you to be happy. And I want you to learn to stand on your own 2 feet, to make your own decisions, even if your wife doesn't like them. I understand, Dad, he nodded without looking up. Good, I straightened up. Now I think we all need some time to cool down and think. I'm not changing my mind. I'm not going back to your house, and I'm not going to keep paying your mortgage. But I would like to see Lilith. Regularly. She'd be happy to, Christopher said quietly. Good, I nodded. You can bring her here on weekends, or we can meet in the park, weather permitting. Veronique, who had been silently seething with anger until then, couldn't take it anymore. So that's what this is all about. You want to take our daughter away from us, just like you took away our house. I'm not taking anyone away, Veronique. I looked at her with regret. I just want to see my granddaughter. That's a normal wish for a grandfather. After everything you've done, you still dare to make conditions? She turned to Christopher. Do you hear that? He's ruining us, and now he's demanding Lilith. I'm not demanding anything. I held up my hand. I'm offering a compromise. You keep my contact with Lilith, and I won't insist on my rights as a co-borrower in the foreclosure proceedings. It could save you a lot of nerves and legal expenses. Christopher looked up. That sounds fair. Fair? Veronique almost choked with indignation. You call that fair? He brings us to our knees and you go along with it? What do you suggest, Veronique? Christopher's voice sounded tiredly angry for the first time. Keep asking for money from the man you wanted out of our lives? Or would you rather fight him in court, spending your last dime on lawyers? She stared at her husband, clearly not expecting such a rebuff. Yeah, I just wanted to, she stammered. You wanted to use my father, Christopher finished for her. use his money and then get rid of him. And now you're angry that the plan didn't work. I've never seen my son like that. It was as if something in him had broken, or, alternatively, woken up. Maybe my little self-esteem speech had hit the mark. You turned him against me. Veronique turned to me again, tears in her eyes. You destroyed our family. No, Veronique, I shook my head. You did this to yourself. By your actions, your words, your attitude, all I did was remove the blindfold from your husband's eyes. She grabbed her bag and sprinted out of the apartment, slamming the door. Christopher remained seated, looking at his hands. I'm sorry about what happened, I said after a long silence. I am too, he sighed. But maybe it's better this way. I've been turning a blind eye to a lot of things for a long time. I guess it's time to face the truth. What are you going to do now? I asked. I don't know, he shrugged. I'll talk to Veronique first. Maybe we can find some common ground. If not, he didn't finish the sentence. What about the house? We'll have to sell it, he sighed. There's no choice. We can't pay the mortgage without your help, and the sooner we do it, the less we'll lose. I nodded. A sensible decision. Dad, he looked up at me. Akrane one, you're really not coming back? Even if I make things right? No, Christopher, I said firmly. That phase of my life is over. I've started a new chapter. And you know what? I love it here. For the first time in a long time, I feel free. He nodded understandingly. I'll bring Lilith over on Saturday, if you don't mind. I'd be delighted, I smiled. I bought her a new book of fairy tales. We didn't finish that one. Christopher stood up, ready to leave. I need to find Veronique. She's probably waiting in the car. Good luck, I walked him to the door. And Christopher. Yes. Remember, you're stronger than you think, and you deserve respect. From your wife, from your daughter, from everyone. He nodded, something new glinting in his eyes. Maybe determination, maybe understanding. When the door closed behind him, I sank into the chair, feeling suddenly tired. The conversation had drained me of all my energy, but I didn't regret anything I'd said. It was time to shatter the illusions on which our relationship had been built for too long. I didn't know what would happen to Christopher and Veronique, whether their marriage would survive the ordeal or collapse under the weight of accumulated problems. I didn't know if I'd see Lilith on Saturday or if Veronique would find a way to prevent it. But one thing I knew for sure, I would no longer subject my life to their whims and manipulations. I'd made my choice, and I'd stay true to it. 3 months flew by. The winter in Maynooth had been harsh even by North Dakota standards, with freezing winds, snowdrifts, and temperatures dropping to 30 degrees below zero. But my little apartment was warm and cozy. I settled into this space, made it my own. I hung a few pictures on the walls, Edith as a young girl, little Christopher on his bicycle, Lilith with a medallion around her neck on her birthday. That last picture caused a particularly acute pain. After that meeting with Christopher and Veronique, I had hoped my son would bring Lilith back on Saturday as promised. I even bought her favorite cookies and a new book of fairy tales. But he didn't. He called in the evening. Apologizing, Veronique was adamantly opposed, hysterical, threatening not to let him see his daughter if he brought her to me. I'm sorry, Dad, he sounded desperate. I can't lose Lilith. I can't. I understood him. I didn't blame him. Veronique had used her most powerful weapon, the threat of separation from her daughter. What father could resist such a threat? In the weeks that followed, Christopher tried several times to arrange for us to see his granddaughter. But each time, Veronique found a way to prevent it. Lilith was suddenly ill, or they had urgent business, or she simply wouldn't let them out of the house. Eventually, I gave up hope. And then they lost the house. This happened a month after we met. The bank initiated foreclosure proceedings because of systematic late payments. Christopher tried to find money. He took extra shifts at work, asked Veronique's relatives for help, even tried to sell the car, but to no avail. The real estate market in Maynooth had fallen on hard times, and it was impossible to find a buyer for their house at a price that would cover the mortgage. I followed the situation from afar, through occasional messages from my son and the local news. I didn't intervene. It was their choice and their consequences. As much as my heart ached for Christopher, and especially for Lilith, I knew I had to remain firm. Otherwise, nothing would change. I would be their ATM again, and they would continue to live beyond their means. In early February, they finally lost their home. Christopher found a small rented apartment on the outskirts of town, a two-bedroom in an old house without an elevator. Far from the good school Lilith went to, far from the parks and playgrounds where she was used to playing. Veronique was mortified by the move. For a woman who prided herself so much on her status and appearance, to find herself in a shabby apartment with shabby wallpaper was a blow to her ego. I learned this from a text message from Christopher. "We've moved in. Veronique hasn't left her bedroom for the second day. Lilith is crying for her room and the toys she had to leave behind. I don't know what to do next, Daddy." I didn't answer. What could I say? "I warned you, didn't I?" "It's your choice." Any words seemed either cruel or empty, and I wasn't going to help them with money. It would only delay the inevitable and prevent them from learning their lesson. My own life, meanwhile, was getting better. I found a small part-time job at the local library. 3 times a week I helped with cataloging books and advising visitors. It didn't pay much, but it was fun and made my days meaningful. I continued to participate in the book club, where I met several interesting people my age. We sometimes gathered at Martha's Cafe on the corner of my street, discussing books, politics, and sharing stories from the past. Helen became a close friend of mine. We often walked together in the park when the weather permitted, or just drank tea in my apartment, reminiscing about old times. She was intelligent, with a sharp tongue and a wonderful sense of humor. In her presence I felt younger, as if years of resentment and disappointment were receding. Once, when we were returning from a local choir concert, Helen sang second alto, she suddenly asked, "Don't you regret your decision, Wilford? About leaving your family?" I wondered. Did I miss Lilith? Madly. Were you worried about Christopher? Every day. But did I regret my decision? No, I finally answered. I did the right thing, for them and for myself. Sometimes people need to hit rock bottom before they can push themselves up. Helen nodded understandingly. You've always been a tough man, Wilford, but a fair one. At the end of February came another message from Christopher. Dad, I really need your help. Veronique has lost her job. Her company is downsizing. We are barely making ends meet. Lilith needs new winter boots. She's outgrown her old ones. Can you lend us some money? I promise to pay you back as soon as things get better. Again, I didn't answer, though the temptation was great, especially at the mention of shoes for Lilith. But I knew not to give in to emotion. Either I stick to my decision, or I go back to being the family ATM. There was no middle ground. In early March, another message followed. Dad, please respond. It's really hard on us. I'm working overtime, but it's not enough. Veronique is depressed. She hardly leaves the house. Lilith has become withdrawn, stopped socializing with her friends. We need your help. I almost gave in. Typed back, how much do you need? But never sent it. Instead, I deleted the message and blocked Christopher's number. It was a painful but necessary decision, like cutting off a gangrenous limb to save the rest of his body. I knew that if I started helping them with money again, nothing would change. They wouldn't learn to live within their means. Veronique wouldn't stop manipulating. Christopher wouldn't get stronger. In mid-March, as the first signs of spring began to appear in Maynooth, I ran into Lilith at the grocery store. She was with Veronique, who looked drained and aged. My granddaughter spotted me first and rushed toward me with a joyful cry. Grandpa! Grandpa! I knelt down and hugged her. She had grown over the months, but she was still my little princess. The familiar locket glittered around her neck, the one precious thing she apparently wouldn't let be taken from her. I missed you so much, she whispered in my ear. Oh, why don't you come to us? Before I could answer, Veronique grabbed Lilith's arm and literally pulled her away from me. We have to go, Lilith. We're late. But Mom, it's Grandpa, the girl protested. I want to talk to him. Some other time, Veronique cut her off, giving me a hateful look. We have to go now. She dragged a stubborn Lilith toward the exit. My granddaughter looked back at me, her face a look of bewilderment and pain. I stood there, unable to move, feeling my heart bursting in my chest. In that moment, I almost regretted my decision. Almost. The next day, I mailed a package to the address of their new apartment. Inside was a book of fairy tales, the same one I'd bought for Lilith 3 months ago. I enclosed a short note for my favorite granddaughter. Grandpa always loves you. The package returned a week later marked address he refused to accept. In late March, as the snow began to melt and the first timid buds appeared on the trees in the park, I received another message, this time from an unfamiliar number. Dad, this is Christopher, from a new number. Please answer it. We need to talk. I hesitated, but finally answered. About what? About money. We're on the verge of being evicted from our apartment. We can't pay next month's rent. I took a deep breath and typed, My mind hasn't changed, Christopher. I won't be giving you any money. But we're your family. How can you do this to us? The same way you did to me. It's your life and your choice. Learn to live within your means. After that message, he didn't write for over a week. I thought that was the end of it, but I was wrong. On the first day of April, the doorbell rang. Veronique stood on the doorstep, pale, without makeup, with circles under her eyes. You have to help us, she said without preamble. We're your family. Come on in, I stepped back, letting her inside. Would you like some tea? I'm not here for small talk, she said sharply, but she came through and sat down on the couch. Still, I put the kettle on. The conversation will be more productive if we're both calm. She remained silent, looking around my apartment. I saw a mixture of envy and contempt in her eyes. My place was modest, but clean and cozy. And unlike their current apartment, I could afford it. We're on the edge, she said finally. Christopher works like hell, but his paycheck isn't enough. I can't find a job. No one wants a woman with my experience for the positions that are open right now. I'm sorry to hear that. I set a cup of tea in front of her. But I don't see how I can help. Money, of course. She looked at me like I was an idiot. You don't need it like we do. You don't have a child to feed and clothe. I have a granddaughter I worry about, I objected calmly. Show, but I'm not allowed to see her. You can see Lilith, Veronique said quickly. I won't interfere anymore. In exchange for money? I raised an eyebrow. You're selling me meetings with your own granddaughter? She flared up. Don't twist it. I just want you to help your family in their time of need, like any normal person would. A normal person doesn't plan to send her father-in-law to a nursing home while continuing to use his money, I pointed out. And she doesn't manipulate her husband into choosing between father and wife. Veronique gritted her teeth. You're never going to forgive me for that conversation, are you? It's not about forgiveness. I took a sip of tea. It's about seeing your true nature. And I decided I didn't want to be part of a game where you make the rules. And that's why you let your granddaughter suffer? There was an accusation in her voice. No, Veronique, I shook my head. You're the one making her suffer. You and Christopher. Your inability to live within your means. Your desire to maintain a semblance of prosperity at all costs. Your pride that prevents you from accepting and adapting to reality. She stood up before finishing her tea. You know what? I came for nothing. You're a heartless old man who thinks only of himself. Maybe, I didn't argue. But I'm an old man who finally learned to say no. Too bad it's too late. Veronique headed for the door, but stopped on the threshold. You'll regret it. We'll find a way to get what's owed to us. After she left, I sat in the chair for a long time, looking out the window at the spring park. My thoughts swirled around Lilith. How was she coping with all these changes? Does she understand why Grandpa doesn't come anymore? Does she blame herself, as children often do in these situations? I wrote another letter for her, a long one, with explanations at a level a 6-year-old could understand, about how adults sometimes can't agree, about how even if we don't see each other, I still love her with all my heart, that when she's older, we'll definitely meet, and then I'll read her all the fairy tales she wants. I didn't send that letter. I knew it wouldn't reach its destination. Instead, I hid it in a box of family photos for the future, just in case. 2 weeks later, in mid-April, I received an envelope with the official stamp of the law firm, Bradford and Associates. Inside was a letter on letterhead, a dry, formal demand for financial compensation on behalf of Christopher and Veronique Barlow for moral damages and pecuniary losses due to the sudden termination of financial support without prior notice. The amount of compensation was stated with startling accuracy, $32,746.15. I grinned, imagining Veronique meticulously calculating every penny of damages. as if my support was their legal right, not voluntary assistance, as if I was obligated to support them for the rest of my life without question or condition. The letter ended with a warning that if they refused to voluntarily pay compensation, the case would be taken to court. A copy of the statement already prepared for filing was attached as proof of their intentions. I did not call a lawyer or consult a lawyer. I didn't write a rebuttal or look for counter-arguments. I simply crumpled up the letter, walked over to the trash can, and threw it in there, along with my empty hopes of reconciliation and family reunification. Watching the paper fall into the trash, I felt not bitterness or anger, but a strange relief. It was as if the last thread tying me to my toxic past had been severed. I was free from manipulation, from guilt, from having to constantly justify my decisions. Helen was right when she said that sometimes you have to let go of people who bring nothing but pain into your life, even if those people are your family, especially if those people are your family. I walked over to the window. Spring was in full swing. The trees were covered in tender green. Children were playing in the park. Old people were basking on benches in the warm April sun. Life went on. My life, without blackmail, without conditions, without having to buy the right to respect and love. I didn't know if I would ever see Lilith or Christopher again. I didn't know if the case would go to trial or if it was just Veronique's empty threat. I didn't know how my family would fare without my financial support. But I did know one thing. I was no longer a victim. I had made my choice, and I was ready to take responsibility for it. No matter how painful it was,